My younger sister had an affair with my husband, and I found out the child I was raising was hers. Now, 15 years later, her children are jealous of my son and want equal treatment. My name is Heather D. Suh, and I'm 42 years old. The LinkedIn notification appeared while I was reviewing quarterly reports. Professional headshot, polished profile. University of Minnesota listed under education. The name was Mira Thorne. I didn't recognize it at first, but the message preview made my jaw tighten before I even clicked it open. Hi, Heather. I know this is out of the blue, but I've been following Nico on social media. Nico. That name still has the power to soften me and sharpen me at the same time. The full message was polite, careful, rehearsed. Mira wrote that she had seen Nico at a networking event in Denver the month before. She mentioned his internship with the Trade Commission, the conferences he had spoken at, the way people in international commodities seemed to know him already. Then came the real reason. She wanted mentorship opportunities, guidance, maybe introductions in the commodity sector since I had so much experience. She said her brother Soren wanted the same. She said they were trying to build their futures too. I stared at her profile photo. 19 years old. My sister Kiera's mouth. Reed's eyes. Not her fault. None of it was her fault. But there it was. I closed the laptop, poured myself coffee, and sat with it for 20 minutes, while the city moved outside my office window, like nothing ancient had just crawled out of the dark and placed its hand on my desk. Nico is 23 now. He graduated top of his class. He works in international trade negotiations and carries himself with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to wonder whether someone has his back. We talk twice a week. He asks for advice, perspective, sometimes a reality check when he's overthinking. He never asks for handouts. That is what I built. Not a dependent. A professional. A man with a spine. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mira. I know my mom and you had a falling out years ago, but family is family, right? Soren and I would really love to connect. Nico is our half-brother after all, and it seems like you've been such an amazing mentor to him. Family is family. I read that line 3 times. 15 years of silence, and now they arrived because success had a scent. Not because they cared when Nico was 8 and his world nearly collapsed. Not because anyone checked on him through middle school, high school, college applications, the lonely questions he was too proud to ask out loud. They saw the finished structure and wanted access to the architect. I could have ignored it, blocked her, let it die quietly. But something about family is family lodged in my throat like a bone. I opened the laptop again and typed one response. Coffee. Saturday. 2 p.m. The Westmont on Archer Street. Private room. Bring your mother. Sent. Then I made the reservation. Private dining room. Quiet. Professional. No interruptions. The kind of room where people either tell the truth or choke on it. After that, I walked to my home office and unlocked the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside were 2 folders I had not touched in months. The first one was 15 years old. Divorce papers with Reed's signature. Financial transfers showing how I moved every asset I could into Nico's education trust before Reed could drain it. Bank statements proving his little afternoon adventures with Kiera while I was overseas working 70-hour weeks. Text logs. Clinic records. Hospital paperwork. And the DNA test. The number on that test is something I will never forget. 0% probability of maternity. I set that folder aside and opened the second one. This one was newer, prepared by my attorney after Mira's first message because I knew exactly where this was heading. The first document inside, though, was also 15 years old. Voluntary termination of parental rights and claims. Kiera's signature sat at the bottom, dated 3 days after I got the DNA results. She signed it at a diner at 6 a.m. because I gave her 2 options. Sign and disappear clean, or face a public case that would expose the affair, the false surrogacy story, and every lie she and Reed built while I was killing myself to become a mother. She chose the easy exit. People like Kiera usually do. Beneath that document was the trust structure I established and fortified over the years. Nico is the sole beneficiary of my estate, my business connections, my resources, irrevocable without his consent. Even if I wanted to add someone else, I would need Nico's signature. I made sure of that, because some part of me always knew this day would come. They were expecting mentorship, introductions, fairness, a conversation about blood and second chances. They were going to get documents, dates, signatures, and the truth their mother abandoned at a diner 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I was 27, and the numbers stopped adding up because of something stupid. I was organizing our filing cabinet on a rainy Thursday night, the kind of boring domestic task you do while waiting for laundry to finish. Tax documents, insurance forms, medical bills, clinic paperwork, all the evidence of a life Reed and I had tried so hard to make look normal. Then I found Nico's hospital discharge papers from the week he was born. The date was right, April 14th. But the note said full-term delivery, 39 weeks and 6 days. I sat on the bedroom floor staring at that line until the words blurred. Kiera had always said Nico came early. 2 weeks premature, she told everyone. My mother repeated it at holidays like a family legend. How frightened we all were. How tiny he had looked. How brave Kiera had been to carry a baby for her sister. That was the story. My younger sister, generous and selfless, had offered to be our surrogate after my surgeries made pregnancy impossible. Reed and I had cried when she said yes. I had believed that was love. Except if Nico was full term, the clinic timeline made no sense. I pulled out the fertility folder, transfer schedule, medication calendars, embryo documentation, appointment records, Reed's signature, my signature, Kiera's signature. The embryo transfer we were told had worked had happened too late for a full-term birth on April 14th. At first, I told myself hospitals made mistakes. Someone probably typed the wrong gestational age. Nurses were busy. Records got copied. Anything could happen. But once doubt enters a room, it starts opening drawers. I checked my work calendar from that year. I had been in Singapore for 6 weeks, late January through early March, negotiating a shipping contract that nearly broke me. Reed had stayed home because someone needed to help Kiera with appointments. I remembered feeling grateful, guilty even. I was halfway across the world while my husband and sister were supposedly protecting our miracle. Then I checked bank statements. There were lunches at restaurants I didn't recognize, hotel charges in the middle of weekdays, parking fees downtown near Kiera's old apartment, all during February and March. All while I was overseas calling every night, asking Reed if Kiera was resting, asking if the baby was okay, asking if he missed me. He always said yes. The phone bill was worse. Hundreds of texts between Reed and Kiera. Not the occasional medical update. Hundreds. Late at night. Early morning. Long strings of messages on days when Reed had told me he was too tired to talk after helping with doctor appointments. I cross-referenced dates with charges, then with clinic records, then with my travel schedule. The timeline formed itself without mercy. My husband and my sister had not accidentally crossed a line. They had built a secret life inside my absence. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't scream. I didn't wake Reed and throw papers in his face. I ordered a DNA test online with overnight shipping. Maternity comparison. Me and Nico. I told myself it was only to silence the fear, to prove I was spiraling, to punish my own imagination for being cruel. When the kid arrived, I waited for the right moment. Nico had a sore throat that week, nothing serious, but I took him to the clinic anyway. He was 8 then, with messy dark hair and a backpack full of dinosaur stickers. While the nurse checked his temperature, I swabbed his cheek and told him it was to test for strep. He believed me because I was his mother, And children do not question the person who packs their lunch and checks under they'll go of bed for monsters. I swabbed my own cheek in the car on the way home. My hand shook so badly I dropped the cap twice. 2 weeks. That was how long the lab said it would take. For 2 weeks I lived beside the lie like it was another person in the house. I made breakfast. I signed homework folders. I kissed Reed goodnight without letting my mouth tremble. I watched Kiara comment, heart emojis, under photos of Nico online, and wondered whether she felt anything at all. The envelope arrived on a Thursday, plain white, lab logo in the corner. I opened it in my car, sitting in the driveway while the house glowed warm in front of me. Reed was inside. Nico was inside. My whole life was inside, waiting for me to walk in as if paper had not just turned it into a crime scene. I read the result 3 times. Probability of maternity, 0%. Not low, not uncertain. 0. Nico was not biologically mine. I sat there until the sun went down and the streetlights came on. I waited for rage, for sobbing, for some dramatic breaking point. Instead, I felt clarity. Cold, sharp, absolute. I made 3 calls before I entered the house: a divorce attorney, a financial advisor, a family court mediator. Then I walked inside. Nico ran to me with a science project in his hands. "Mom, can you help me with the clouds?" I picked him up and held him so tightly he laughed. "Of course," I said, because whatever blood had lied about, love had not. That night, I helped Nico glue cotton balls onto blue poster board and explained how clouds formed while the DNA results sat in my briefcase like a loaded weapon. He asked if rain clouds were heavier than regular clouds. I told him yes. Sometimes things carry more than they look like they carry. He nodded seriously and kept gluing, completely unaware that his mother was sitting beside him with her entire life split open under the table. Reed came into the room once, smiled at us, and said, "You two look busy." I looked up at the man I had loved, the man who would let me thank him for supporting a surrogacy while he was sleeping with my sister. And somehow my voice stayed calm. "Science project," I said. "Clouds." The next morning, before Reed woke up, I called Kiara. She answered on the 3rd ring, sleepy and annoyed. "Heather?" "It's barely 6. I said, "Bernie's Diner on 5th, 1 hour. Come alone." She laughed nervously. "What is this about?" "1 hour," I repeated, then hung up. I arrived first and chose a back booth where nobody would hear us. I ordered coffee I didn't drink and placed the folder on the table. Kiara came in wearing leggings, oversized sunglasses, and the fragile expression of someone who already knew the storm had found her. She slid into the booth across from me and started, "Is Nico okay?" I pushed the folder toward her. "Open it." I watched her read the maternity test first, then the clinic timeline, then the discharge papers, then the hotel charges and phone records. Her face lost color in stages, like a light dimming room by room. "Heather," she whispered, "I can explain." "No," I said, "you can sign." I pulled out the document my attorney had drafted overnight. Voluntary termination of parental rights and claims. Her name printed cleanly at the top. "You have 2 options. Option 1, I file a public case. We subpoena clinic records, phone records, hotel records, and Reed. Everyone finds out how my sister volunteered to carry my child, then conceived one with my husband while I was overseas, working to pay for all of it." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Option 2, you sign this. You disappear from Nico's life permanently. No claim, no contact, no rights, no future request for access." Her hands shook. "He's my son." "No," I said, and my voice went colder than I thought possible. "He is the child you abandoned, the moment you let me raise him under a lie." Tears filled her eyes. I didn't move. "You have 5 minutes. He deserves to know me. He deserves stability. You had 8 years to choose him honestly. You chose secrecy." She stared at the document, then at me. For one brief second, I saw my little sister, the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Then I remembered Nico's face over that science project. trusting me with the kind of trust children only give before adults teach them pain. I placed the pen on the paper. Kiera signed after 4 minutes. Reed was next. I filed for divorce that afternoon. Irreconcilable differences on paper, because I had no interest in turning Nico's childhood into courtroom gossip. But before Reed saw anything, I moved fast. The joint savings, $43,000, went straight into an irrevocable education trust for Nico. The house was in my name, purchased before the marriage. Reed's debts stayed Reed's. My attorney structured everything with clean precision. I would remain Nico's legal mother with full decision-making authority, and Reed could have visitation only if it did not disturb Nico's stability. That evening, after Nico was asleep, I sat Reed at the kitchen table and slid the papers across to him. He frowned. "What is this?" "Exactly what it looks like." His face tightened. "Heather, if this is about us being distant lately..." I placed the DNA test on top of the divorce papers. The room changed. He stared at it, then at me, then back down. "You know," he said. "Sign. I can explain." "I don't want your explanation. I want your signature." "What about Nico?" "He stays with me. You can't just take him." I leaned forward. "Try me. I can file contested. I can put Kiera under oath. I can subpoena everything. Or you can sign, move out by the end of the month, and let that boy keep one parent who did not choose cowardice." Reed cried. Kiera had cried too. I learned that day how often tears appear after consequences arrive, not before damage is done. He signed within 2 days. By the end of the month, I had packed our life into boxes, accepted a position in another state, and moved Nico 800 miles away. Before we left, I sat him down and told him, "Your dad and I won't be married anymore, but you're staying with me. That is not changing." His voice was small. "Promise?" I held his face in my hands. "Promise." And I meant it more than I had ever meant anything. We moved before the neighborhood could turn our pain into gossip. New state, new school, new job, new apartment with thin walls and a view of a parking lot, but it was ours. Nico was 8, still small enough to believe moving boxes were castles if I cut windows into them with a kitchen knife. He asked about Reed sometimes in those first few months, always carefully, like he could sense the question hurt me even though I tried to hide it. I kept my answers simple. "Your dad loves you in his own way, but he is not able to be consistent right now." I hated protecting Reed from the full weight of his own cowardice, but I refused to make Nico carry adult wreckage before he was old enough to understand it. Years passed. Nico grew taller than me by 16, then smug about it by 17. He was sharp, observant, and disciplined in a way that made teachers either adore him or fear how prepared he was. I built my career back from the ground up, first in logistics consulting, then in international commodity strategy, then into the kind of negotiation rooms where people spoke softly because billions were implied. I brought Nico into that world slowly, not as a shortcut, but as education. I taught him how to read a room, how to ask the second question, how to never confuse access with achievement. He earned everything I gave him because I never wanted him to become the kind of person who thought blood entitled him to a chair. When Nico was 14, I met Marcus Ellery at a trade conference in Chicago. He was a regulatory attorney, steady, dryly, funny, and patient in a way that did not feel passive. He didn't rush into my life pretending to fix it. He let Nico decide whether he belonged there. That mattered. Marcus had his own scar tissue. His ex-girlfriend, Tessa, had used dependence like a leash, turning every bill, every crisis, every emotional collapse into proof that he owed her more. When I finally told him about Kiera and Reed, he listened without flinching. Then he said, "Some people don't want forgiveness. They want access restored." I remember that sentence because years later, when Mira messaged me, it rang in my head like a bell. Marcus never tried to replace anyone. He showed up to Nico's debate tournaments, helped him practice interviews, and taught him how to argue without raising his voice. Nico respected him because Marcus never demanded affection. He earned trust the slow way, which is the only way that lasts. For the first time in years, I began to believe my life was not just something I had rescued from betrayal. It was something I had built with intention. We never talked about Kiera or Reed unless Nico asked. They faded into the distance like a city we had once escaped. But on Nico's 18th birthday, I knew I had to stop deciding for him. After dinner, I handed him a sealed envelope across the table. Marcus quietly took the dishes to the kitchen and gave us privacy. "You're an adult now," I said. "The full story is in there. If you want to know, read it. If you don't, we burn it together." Nico looked at the envelope for a long time. Then he opened it. He read the first page, the maternity test, the timeline summary, enough for the truth to show its shape. His face stayed calm, but I saw his hand tighten around the paper. He looked up at me. "Did you ever regret keeping me?" The question cut through 15 years of armor. "Not for 1 second," I said. He closed the envelope. "Then I don't need the rest. We burned it that night in the fireplace." He stood beside me while the pages curled, blackened, and disappeared into ash. I let him believe that was the whole archive, because symbolically, it was. But I kept certified copies locked in my desk. Not because I wanted revenge, because people who abandon responsibility often return when consequences stop being convenient, and now they had. On Saturday, I arrived at the Westmont 15 minutes early. I confirmed the private room, ordered water, and placed both folders on the table in front of me. One held the past. The other held the legal wall I built around Nico's future. Mira, Soren, and Kiera were expecting mentorship, introductions, maybe a soft conversation about fairness. They were not expecting the truth to be waiting for them in 2 folders. They arrived at 2 on the dot. Mira entered first, dressed in a blazer too formal for coffee, carrying the anxious confidence of a 19-year-old trying to look like she belonged in rooms she had only seen on LinkedIn. Soren followed behind her, 17. Uncomfortable in a button-down that didn't quite fit. Then came Kiera. My sister looked older than the last time I had seen her. Softer around the face, sharper around the eyes. The kind of woman who had spent 15 years pretending one locked door meant the house behind it no longer existed. She didn't hug me. She barely looked at me. Mira extended her hand. "Heather, thank you so much for meeting us. I know this is probably strange after so long." I shook her hand, then gestured toward the chairs. "Sit." They did. Mira started with small talk about the restaurant, about school, about seeing Nico at the Denver networking event. I let her speak for almost a minute before I interrupted. "Why are you here?" She blinked. "We wanted to talk about opportunities. Be specific." Her eyes flicked toward Kiera, who stared at the table. "Nico has had incredible guidance from you. He knows people. He understands the industry. Soren and I are trying to build careers too, and since we're family—" "There it is," I said quietly. Soren leaned forward. "We're not asking for money, just introductions. Mentorship, the kind of access Nico had." I looked at him, then at Mira. They were young, ambitious, not evil, but they had walked into that room carrying a lie their mother never corrected, believing blood was a key and I was the locked door. I reached down and placed both folders on the table. "I'm going to show you something," I said. "Nobody speaks until I'm finished." Kiera finally looked up. Fear flashed across her face. She knew the folders. I opened the first one and slid the maternity test toward Mira. "Read it." Her expression changed slowly. Confusion first, then disbelief, then the first clean cut of understanding. Soren took the page from her hand and read it too. "What is this?" Mira whispered. "A DNA test from 15 years ago," I said. "Nico is not my biological son. He is Kiera's." Soren turned to his mother. "Mom?" Kiera's lips parted, but no words came out. I placed the discharge papers beside the test. Nico was listed as full term. The clinic timeline your mother and Reed gave me was impossible. I was in Singapore during the conception window, working to pay for what I thought was a surrogacy. Meanwhile, Reed and Kiera were meeting at hotels during weekday afternoons. I laid out the bank records next. Then phone logs. Then clinic notes. Each page landed softly on the table, but the silence grew heavier with everyone. Mira's voice cracked. "You had an affair with her husband." Kiera whispered, "It was complicated." "No," I said. "It was cruel." I opened the second folder and slid the termination document across the table. 3 days after I got the DNA results, your mother signed this. Voluntary termination of parental rights and claims. Permanent, legal, no contact, no future access. Mira's hand shook as she read it. "You made her sign away her child?" "I gave her a choice," I said. "Public case with full discovery, or a clean exit." She chose the exit in less than 5 minutes. Soren stared at Kiera like he had never seen her before. "You just left him?" Kiera's eyes filled with tears. "I was young. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." I leaned forward. "You knew enough to lie. You knew enough to sign. You knew enough to disappear." Mira looked at me, desperate now. "But Nico is our half-brother." "Biologically, yes." "Then doesn't that mean something? It means your mother had a child she chose not to raise. It does not mean you get access to what I built for him." I pulled out the trust documents and placed them on top. "Nico is the sole beneficiary of my estate, my business resources, and my professional network planning. Irrevocable without his consent. Even if I wanted to add someone else, I couldn't do it without him." Mira wiped her cheek. Soren looked stunned. Kiera looked cornered. "You came here expecting fairness?" I said. "Fairness already happened. Nico got the mother who stayed. You got the mother who walked away from him and taught you to ask for what she forfeited." Kiera stood suddenly. "They're just kids. They shouldn't be punished for my mistake." "I'm not punishing them," I replied. "I'm simply not rewarding you through them." I stood and gathered the folders. "Do not contact Nico. Do not ask him for access, mentorship, introductions, money, or emotional closure. If any of you cross that line, my attorney already has the paperwork prepared," Mira whispered. "Heather, please." I paused at the door but didn't turn around. "Ask your mother why she signed faster than she fought." Then I left. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and ordinary. My phone buzzed before I reached the car. "Nico." "Done?" I typed back. "Done." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then came one word. "Good." That was all we needed. 15 years ago, Kiera chose convenience. Reed chose betrayal. I chose a little boy with frightened eyes and a science project about clouds. I built him a life so solid, their regret could not touch it. They came looking for access to what I built. Instead, they found the truth buried under their mother's signature. That is not cruelty. That is consequence.